Hello and welcome, I'm Oles Garjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. On January 21st, Brussels hosted trilateral talks between Ukraine, the European Commission and Russia on the future of gas transit through Ukraine. The current contract between Ukraine's Naftogaz and Russia's Gazprom is set to expire at the end of 2019. To discuss this, we welcome to the studio today Andrian Prokip, energy expert at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. Hello and thank you for being with us today.
Hello.
So I would like to discuss what every side was proposing during these negotiations. As far as I understand, the official position of these negotiations was to prevent a gas crisis happening after the end of this year when no treaty is basically signed. So what was the Russian side proposing to resolve it?
Well, Russian position is to have another long-term contract and just to forget about the decision of Stockholm arbitration. So
why would they want to forget about the decision of Stockholm
actually, because
arbitration?
they don't agree with this position of the arbitration commission that Gazprom has to pay to Naftogaz, because actually if Gazprom considered this as just business, but political establishment of Russia, who actually is running Gazprom, they don't agree with this because they consider this as an offensive decision against Russia.
Mm-hmm. But Gazprom was ready to pay the fine, yes?
Well, actually, at the beginning, Gazprom was ready. They even put the amount of the debt to their financial documents, but later, as they know, political establishment, Kremlin, they disagreed with the position that Gazprom had to pay to Naftogaz directly.
I understand. Well, the official Russian position during this negotiation was to prolong the existing contract, right?
Right.
Without any fresh expert assessment. How do you think they would benefit from it, and why Ukraine wouldn't want to continue to prolong the existing contract?
Well, for Ukraine, I think it's very difficult to speak about long-term contracts with Russia in general, because this will undermine the popularity of any person who offers to have a long-term contract with Russia. Especially, another thing is that if we have a long-term contract, we still have a risk of Russia blackmailing Ukraine with interrupting gas supplies. And in this case, the best option would be if Europeans had a direct contract with Russia and the gas trading point were shifted to the eastern border of Ukraine. In this case, just it would be EU-Russia deal. And
so Ukraine wouldn't participate in the deal. Ukraine would just transit the gas?
Actually,
could you explain this
yes,
a bit broader?
Not at all. Ukraine will participate in the deal in the case if there is a consortium of companies, European companies and Ukrainian system operator who is responsible for transmitting gas, and they will be acting as a group of companies responsible for transit. But the main actor will be European part, because they are buying gas from Russia to fulfill their own needs. And in this case, Ukraine will be protected, because it will be just a business mostly between European companies and Gazprom, and Ukraine still will make revenues from transporting this gas.
Mm-hmm. Does this mean that Russia would have to behave more sustainably?
Well, it's difficult to predict Russia's behavior, but probably yes, because Russia didn't use this energy blackmailing to Western European states, but only towards post-Soviet and post-socialist states. Mm-hmm. And if they have, so we have a good example of Russia-Germany energy relations. They have very constructive relations, and Germany is benefiting a lot, and that's why they are in favor of Nord Stream 2.
Yes, they agreed on construction of this pipeline. Yes.
So in this case, I think Russia's behavior will be more constructive, and hence Ukraine will be more protected in the case of direct agreement between EU companies and Russia.
Well, speaking of this Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, the thing is that Ukrainian Naftogaz accused Russia of delaying these negotiations, in order to get this Nord Stream 2 pipeline built first. Naftogaz Deputy Chief Executive Yuri Vitrenko said that then they will say we're okay without any Ukrainian transit at all. So what kind of game is Russia playing? Is this true that they are trying to delay these negotiations as far as they can, so they can succeed in this construction?
Well, I don't think so, because anyway, that's not only about the building Nord Stream 2 pipeline, but other pipelines in Germany to connect the Nord Stream 2. And most probably that before 2022, all these pipelines wouldn't be ready to
function.
To function and to transmit gas. So it will be necessary any kind of agreement between Russia and either Ukraine or European companies to transit gas from Russia to European states. On the other hand, Russia didn't start this campaign on building pipelines bypassing Ukraine 4 years ago. Actually, they started this, the idea appeared more than about 20 years ago. And, you know, if not Crimea annexation, there would be a South Stream pipeline bypassing Ukraine, and probably the Nord Stream 2 would already act. So it's about Russia's long-term policy to have more pipelines to Europe, and including pipelines bypassing Ukraine.
But how can Ukraine stay as this transit partner for Europe and Russia transiting gas?
Well, in the case if Nord Stream 2 is built, and it's very probably that it will be constructed, so I think the only chance for Ukraine is just economic competition. Either economic competition or having long-term deals, which would guarantee some specific amounts of transit through Ukraine. But so it's, as I already said, there are some issues making this long-term contract more complicated.
Well, speaking of this negotiations that just happened in Brussels, how did the Ukrainian Naftogaz react to this Russian proposition to prolong the existing contract? And did we come up with some new ideas what to do in this situation?
I don't know how Naftogaz really reacted to this proposal, but currently Naftogaz and Ukraine is in better position comparing to Russia and Europe, because EU and Russia are dependent from existence contract transit, and contract is expiring in the end of the year, and so probably Naftogaz is waiting to have another proposals, maybe more beneficial proposals from Russia and from the side of the European Union, who are extremely interested in having gas in early 2020.
So what could be the solution? As far as I know, the European Commission had also its proposition towards this whole situation, how to resolve it. And so what is the conclusion of this negotiation?
Well, the best option for Ukraine would be having this consortium of European companies acting with Ukrainian independent operator, who would make deals with Russian company, but this requires that what is called unbundling. So Ukrainian company has to be ready. It should be an independent operator responsible for gas transmission, and Europeans are not satisfied with slow pace of unbundling this transit operator from Naftogaz. Another option is if the parties don't manage to make either a long-term deal or or conduct this idea with this consortium. Another option is to having short-term contracts, like for months, for 1 month, for 2 weeks, just to book capacities. Russian company will book capacities to transmit some amounts of gas to European Union, considering the demand in the EU.
Well, how would you evaluate then the proposition of the European Commission to assign a 10-year or even longer natural gas transit contract, and that contract would provide for economically viable transit volumes that could be of interest to high-profile European investors, so they could be interested in modernizing Ukrainian equipment within some time?
Well, I think this idea is mostly pushed with the perception that if Ukraine has a long-term contract,
it will be protected, kind of, that we are going to stay as a transit country.
Yeah, and we don't, in this case, Ukraine will less oppose the Nord Stream 2 construction. Personally, I still believe that the idea of this consortium is better than a long-term contract. However, sure, the long-term contract depends on the volumes of the gas transit. If it were, for example, 90 BCM, I think everyone in Ukraine would be happy, but that's probably, well, but this actually it's unreal. So I think it will be about 30 or 40 BCM in the case of long-term contract. And Ukrainian representatives like Naftogaz, like other officials, they wouldn't be satisfied with these small amounts having a long-term contract.
And also, Ukrainian side is emphasizing that we want to sign this new contract that would comply with the European legislation which is being currently implemented in Ukraine, but Russia doesn't want to recognize this new law that was adopted here in Ukraine. So how to continue negotiations if this is one of the stumbling blocks, the legislation?
Well, it's still about that bundling. So we have to meet all European requirements, and it's about splitting the separate company from Naftogaz, which will be responsible for transmitting gas, and this is European practice.
This is one of those issues.
And Europeans will work only with the independent company, so they don't want to work with a company which doesn't meet requirements of the third energy package.
And just to conclude our conversation, because unfortunately we are running out of time, what can we expect? How can this situation unfold? As far as I understand, these negotiations should continue somewhere in spring, probably in May. What would be your forecast?
Well, considering that Ukraine is right now rather in good position because Europeans need gas, Russia needs revenues, and there is no extra capacities to transit gas except for a Ukrainian pipeline. I think that Ukrainian party will be increasing bids just to, with the hope to have better conditions for Ukrainian transit in future.
Well, thank you so much for your interesting comments, and thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Thanks.
That was Andrian Prokip, energy expert at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay tuned for more with UATV.